I'm Vernon Brown. I'm one of the founders of Stewards of Change, and I'm also here today with a hat from my day job, which is the CEO of Aspiranet. It's my pleasure to kick this session off. It's a co-presenter is Martin Duggan, who is the Director of Social Programs for the Watson Health group. And he's going to take some time to present the work that's being done inside of the social programs and their connection to IBM's greater Watson Health initiatives. And then I'm going to be able to follow up with him a little bit around the kind of the where the rubber hits the road. And so looking forward to Martin's presentation and your interest in responding to both of our presentations. Martin?
Thank you, Vernon. Afternoon, everybody. I won't breathe deeply into the microphone. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the work we've been doing in the cognitive space. For those of you here last year, we talked about some of the stuff we started to do, and we're now quite progressing in a lot of the initiatives that we're driving forward in this area. And then Vernon's going to come back up and give his other role a perspective of how that applies in this type of area. I've got a bit of feedback coming through here. Okay. So really looking at employing cognitive computing to advance program effectiveness. And I'm not going to give you a big advert here for the IBM stuff, but I want to start people to start thinking around what does this new type of technology actually mean? Whether it comes from IBM or Microsoft or Google or any other of the big players that are investing in this new type of advanced analytics, which we call cognitive computing. But to start off with, I just want to take a poll around the room. How many people actually have seen the Jeopardy work that was done a few years ago? Okay, good. And at least in this audience, I don't have to explain what Jeopardy actually is. When I'm in Europe, I usually have to explain what Jeopardy actually is. But what I want you to look at is the $1 million on the Watson part in the middle, all right? Because we're going to come back to this on a video a little later, where I'm going to talk about how the technology actually works in taking an assessment on what a right answer might be, what a range of options might actually be. And that's a key part of what is different with this type of technology is that it's dealing with the known knowns, the unknown knowns, the known unknowns, the different options and decisions that are not necessarily a binary yes or no decision. And we'll come back to that a number of times during this part of the presentation. But as Vernon said, I work for a new group in IBM called Watson Health. I wanted to share the mission that we have as a group with you because it's not really what I imagine you would imagine IBM would actually be all about. And that is we'll serve as a catalyst to improve and save lives of people around the world and lower the health and human services costs through the power of cognitive insights. So we've been investing since just over a year now. We've purchased companies in the healthcare and the social care area all around the world that really focus on advanced analytics, and we're bringing the power of cognitive to those organizations, to the technologies they bring, and most importantly to the data they bring. And that's one of the big things that we're looking at here is the whole concept of what is data, what is information, and what is knowledge. And we'll come back to this a little bit more again, right? But this is one of the big things that is different with cognitive systems. And if you take a look along this evolution here, data to information to knowledge is what we're really talking about. How do we actually build, how do we capture, how do we utilize knowledge? And I've been asked a couple of times, what's the difference between information, data, and knowledge? So I've got a nice little example I use in conversations that tries to draw the difference. So data might be Martin Duggan. It might be that I'm born on a certain date, I live at a certain address. That's data that's available about me. Information might be things, for instance, like programs. It might be that I'm actually unemployed. It might be that I have particular skills in particular areas. It may be that there's programs available in various different government organizations, non-government organizations that may be available to actually help me. But knowledge is where we put all that together. Which program applied to Martin Duggan best increases his chances of getting a job and staying in that job over a sustained period of time. Not that I'm unemployed. At least no one's told me that yet. But that's what I'm trying to draw out, is that the knowledge element is another degree and another element of how this all comes together. We see different usages of this type of thing, and in longer versions of this presentation, I give lots of different scenarios, but actually Vernon's going to talk through a number of those in how it applies in his organisation. But when you look at the application of cognitive technologies to that information, to that data, and how we gain that knowledge, we've been doing a lot of work in the healthcare, which I'll cover some examples on 2 slides later, about how we've actually been applying cognitive in the healthcare over the last couple of years. And what we're very much looking at the moment is how we apply that to the integrated health and social care systems, the whole conversation earlier on about social determinants. We're actually actively looking at this moment in time about how social determinants, how that information can actually give you knowledge to actually apply in the healthcare space. Right? But what does cognitive actually, how does it actually draw a different relationship with what we do as humans? And we talk about this new partnership. Humans are actually really good at things like common sense, dilemmas, morals, compassion, imagination, dreaming. I dream a lot. Abstraction and generalization. These are things that we're actually very good at as humans, what the human brain does very well. And what cognitive actually does is it starts to bring in the ability to process natural language, right? To do pattern identification. If you followed any of the acquisitions we've made, one of them was a company called Merge, radiology. We're now applying cognitive technology to looking at X-rays. So instead of having to look through 100 X-rays, you can look at the most important ones first. Natural language, we've got a variety of different things going on in different places around the world. In Singapore, for instance, if you're actually trying to figure out how to do your tax returns, you can go online and actually talk to a version of Watson that actually takes your language and actually finds out the answers to the questions that you're actually doing. So it's like a Siri for tax. We're sort of trying to do this. We're talking to the human services equivalent over there about doing the same thing in their area, but they're struggling a little bit with some of the constructs there.
Singapore's tax laws are much simpler than ours.
Oh, they are. Trust me, I've done both. They are much simpler. Locating knowledge. Particularly on the next slide, when I talk, a couple of slides when I talk about the healthcare examples, this is a big part of it. There's huge amounts of knowledge that's out there, but how do you find the right bit that's relevant to you? If you've got a particular cancer that you're looking for, how do you find the best treatment pattern available for that particular cancer today? Because last week there was a new treatment protocol that was put into trials. How do you find that? Right? Machine learning. Eliminating bias. Now, I've talked at a number of different presentations here in the US recently, and I usually get a question on the eliminating bias thing. Right, the thing that cognitive things can actually do is actually eliminate your bias from the data. We're still working on how we eliminate the bias that's actually in the data. Right? They're 2 different things. But if you've got a caseworker who's looking at different providers for a particular situation, typically they'll go to the same provider they're used to, irrespective of whether that provider is actually the best provider, or the most appropriate, or the cheapest, or all 3. Right? I'm doing some work at my home country at the moment, which means I keep on disappearing for a few minutes every now and again, about provider management. 750 local providers that are very small providers that they're trying to figure out how they actually find the best provider for the particular circumstance. Very interesting stuff. And then endless capacity, we hope. So go back to Watson. So what Watson does, Watson understands, and this is all cognitive systems. Watson understands it can read and understand documents data, both structured and unstructured, at massive scale. Thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of documents at speed. It can search and evaluate and return evidence-based recommendations. And you'll see that on the video I'm about to show you. And then finally, it learns. And this is the most important difference from 10 years ago when these early technologies were around. Every time you make a decision to choose a particular intervention on a particular set of circumstances, it learns from your choice and changes the prioritization for the next time that person comes through. So that it is collective, your collective wisdom over the period of time. So I'm just going to show you a little video back to Jeopardy about how that actually how that works.
The parents of this 52nd governor of New York immigrated to the United States from Salerno, Italy. Watson?
Who is Mario Cuomo?
Correct.
Let's finish MC5.
This child star got his first on-screen kiss in My Girl. Ken?
Here's Macaulay Culkin.
Correct.
Children's book titles, 400.
By Judith Viorst, Alexander and the Terrible, Terrible, No Good, Blank, Blank Day. Ken?
What is very bad?
Correct.
Book title, 600.
By Dr. Seuss, The Blank Hats of Bartholomew Cubbins. Ken again.
What is 500?
You're right.
Book title's 800.
By Maurice Sendak, In the Blank Kitchen. Ken?
What is Night?
Correct.
Book title's 1000.
A classic by Crockett Johnson, Harold and the Blank Crayon. Watson?
What is purple?
Correct. Taking you to 4,400.
So the point there I was trying to show to you is the green line was showing the confidence factor, and the other lines were showing the other options that were being displayed that Watson was considering at that particular point in time. And when you apply this into a medical world or a human services world, you can imagine that the answers coming back are going to be this intervention, this intervention, this intervention. Here's the confidence factor on it. But you're not making the decision for the caseworker. You're helping the caseworker with the options that are available that the caseworker can then make the final decision, because there will probably be information that isn't known, that will be more apparent to the person who's working with the individual, and where that individual can make that final final decision. Now, at some stage, you want to capture why did you make that decision differently. You know, if you took a low confidence factor, what was new, what was different? What did you know that Watson didn't know? And that's what we mean by that learning element coming through. Now, what have we been doing with this? We've actually, extensively over the last couple of years in the healthcare area, working with a number of, as you can see, well-known medical organizations in the US, looking at how we actually extract that knowledge, how we actually find the data that enables us to come up with those evidence-based recommendations. I'll just give you a couple of examples. All right, so in Memorial Sloan Kettering, 170,000 cancer patients a year, basically taking the specialist knowledge that the doctors have there, and the longitudinal data that they have on those cancer treatments and the longitudinal impact, and actually building a knowledge base of cancer treatments. The same with Boston Children's Hospital. 7,000 rare diseases that, frankly, many kids die before they're actually diagnosed. So how can you actually build that diagnosis for those genetic disorders or the treatments in real time? And that work has now actually gone out to the Open Pediatrics Forum to actually make that available to doctors all over the world. Cleveland Clinic, they're looking for the needle in the haystack, for the one piece of genome sequencing that enables them to actually find the right treatment for you, the right trial, the right whatever, and taking the data out of their EMR systems, and then using that to be training by doctors to actually look at the interventions. To the point now where the Cleveland Clinic are actually saying that this is getting as good a judgment as the doctors that they've actually got on staff. So that's where we are in the medical area. What we're looking at now is how we move that into the human services area. And I've been talking about this for a couple of months now with Stewards of Change. You're going to hear some of the work we've been working with them in the later sessions. But that's where our focus and strategy is now. How do we move it into the human services area? So we've got a clear view of that there is a set of processes that every human services organisation uses. And we've done a lot of work in the last 6 months looking at different use cases, different scenarios across every aspect of that sort of process model. I don't have enough time to go through every one of those things today, but I'm here for the next couple of days, and so my colleagues are as well. But what I'll do now is ask Vernon to come back up. We've been working with Vernon's organisation on a use case around this, and ask Vernon to give you, as you call it, was it from the troops on the floor? Where the rubber hits the road in terms of the type of things that this actually means. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Oops, I went the wrong way. So, my day job is the CEO of Aspiranet. which is an organization in California that serves about 22,000 children, youth, and families across the state of California, and those are the major counties that we're providing services across the state. So Margot had said, well, how did you get there? Well, this is my 38th year with this organization. You're looking at the original Aspiranet social worker. And 38 years ago, I would have been, let's see, what time is it? It's a little bit after noon. I would have been finishing up lunch for 8 delinquent adolescent boys. Having started my career in the Youth Service Bureau movement, I moved into running a group home. And so that experience has always been present with me to this day, even though today that there are nearly 900 staff, 7 core programs across the organization. And I can say that I can document through our database that we had since 1985 that we've served over 22 million days, have provided 22 million days of care for children and youth. So think about that. And that's just one organization. Now we're operating at scale. Earlier, that scale was in response to actually the crack epidemic and then the methamphetamine, usage. And so our organization scaled to meet that need back in the 80s, in the mid-80s. And then at that point in time, we said, enough's enough. There was over 500,000 children in care, 125,000 in California at the end of the 90s. And we said, that's enough. And so as a part of what we've created, is a sense of our commitment to being able to move children to permanency and safety and ultimately well-being. And what we have had the pleasure of talking with Martin and his group is how do we move to a way in which we look at the children or youth, young adults, who are exiting foster care. And it's a known fact, right? We know that the outcomes for those young people, those young adults, is very poor as they transition. And California has been very far in advance of the rest of the country, in my opinion, around being able to move kids that are exiting from foster care. And we have about 1,000 young adults from the ages of 18 to 26 that are provided somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 different distinct programs, including housing, employment, education, life skills, and family and community connections, right? And so that is a huge responsibility. And also the responsibility is that we want to be able to make sure that these young adults are treated as young adults, right? And that they're not given short shrift because of their status having come through foster care, but we recognize the essential value in their contribution and their future. And just as you all who are old enough, some of us with the gray hair, have our own adult children, we all watch that transition. And I used to use my son, who's now in his 30s, as an example of a use case. Got kicked out of housing at the University of San Diego. Ended up sleeping, at couch surfing for years and years. At least it seemed to me it was years and years. But through that all, when he got kicked out of housing, I drove the damn truck down to get his stuff out of the car, out of his room and into an apartment, and wrote the check. And that is essentially our responsibility to these young adults is that, and our commitment is that we're going to do what it takes in order to be able to make sure that they have the same opportunities that we and I wanted for my own children as they grew up. And that is the key essential component of that. And it's why I really feel as if I've had a lot of opportunity to visit with Martin, and his focus on a collaborative care management, a focus on the individual. It's over there, in Human Services 2.0, folks, on the wall. Centered, individually, consumer-centric. What we're looking for are ways in which we can provide housing, employment, educational, life skills, and family and community-centered types of services. hugely important for these young people as they go there. And many of them, out of those young people, come to us, they're homeless because they exit, and in California, the policy is that they can come back. Because, when you're 18 and you've been, somebody's told you what to do, what do? You go, the hell with y'all. I'm going to do my own thing. And they rapidly find that you cannot always do that. And then at the same time, we're preparing them, but as they exit out, to be able to do that too as well. So just always think about your own transition into adulthood and the challenges that you all face, and that is the day-to-day collaborative care management that we have. There are 12 specific job titles within my organization related to all of those key elements up there. Housing's the first one. We do not want them to be homeless, first and foremost. Education and employment are the next two issues that we really focus on, and it's that value orientation. So now you always have to have a roadmap to how to get there, right? Now, and this is also part of the way in which we've been working with IBM and trying to look at a pilot, and it's hard to see from back there. And let's see, but this is essentially a workflow process. We call it our core practice model, and incorporated in it on one page is the way in which you can look at how we look at everything. But there are really key three elements. Where are you living? Family setting. What kinds of supports and services are you being provided, and what treatment modalities and therapies are available? Here you see are the child welfare goals, and then it's just a process, how you get to the end, right? And so the whole point is that what we have done in our conversations and looking at the new Watson care management solution is to map what we're doing back to what the slide that Martin had shown previously. And so you see referrals there for us, assessment, the service planning, performance assessment, and outcomes. In other words, what we know is that it's not rocket science, folks, in a lot of ways. It's just simply breaking down each element of the service array and the process that works to get us to that point in time. So the pilot that we're working on is a proof of concept for the TAY youth. We call them transitional age youth. And it's an integrated care management focus. And it reflects the evolving needs of both health and human services, and how we get to that. And we talk about wellness in our organization rather than separating that out. And we talk with the young people about how they're going to do that. We look at that person-centered collaborative focus of bringing everyone together. And our case planning, right, and the tools that we have are inadequate, in my opinion, at this point in time, in order to be able to be open enough. And I think that the initiatives that are occurring inside of the Watson Health Group here, and the social programs in particular, look to us to be able to offer us those kinds of services in a cloud-based solution, which provides a kind of a design and functionality that at this point in time we don't have, right? And so the point that I'm making here is that where we're looking for into the future, right, is a cognitive care management. And this is what Martin was talking about earlier. These are the three components that I would like to see a part of the case management system or a care management system that we're looking for into the future. And I'll give examples of just how that works. So Martin talked about natural language and inquiry of unstructured data. And we've seen some of the things where 80 to 90% of the information or the data that's available to us in the social programs is unstructured. That includes my case notes. In the earlier slide, you might have picked up that I believe, and our organization has believed, in not having young adults live in congregate kinds of settings. A lot of transition age youth across the country live in congregate settings or live in apartments where they're all kind of put together. You know, that's like a disaster waiting to happen, right? And it's also not a reflection of the way in which they're going to live their lives in the future. They have to learn how to handle being in, renting apartments, renting a room, handing out, living with a family potentially. And so we have today there's probably 4 or 5 more leases. At least at this point in time, we're managing over 250 apartment units across the state of California. It's daunting, right, to be able to do that. Just making sure we process it all and make sure that it's all done. I would love nothing better than to have a machine be able to take my leases, all my leases, and put them in, all 250 plus. It's probably 258 today. Put them all in, and then have it be able to project out where they all are, how much I'm paying for them, and then at the same thing, how I would want to know is, where are jobs within walking distance of that location? Are there issues around crime that I would have to be concerned about and putting those young people in places that I wouldn't want my own children to be living in? Are there places in which they can get on public transportation to get to educational opportunities? Are there good places for them to be able to eat? Are there good places for them to be able to buy food? Something, the other thing we're looking for is, can they get furniture? And how do they get their things? We put up all the furniture initially. We have a trust account for each one of these young adults, and we're putting away savings for them at the point in time where they can leave, whether they're turning 21 or they're turning 25. All right? And so there are like discrete points in those processes that we need to do, and more importantly, we need to be able to have a way in which we're tracking that in a dynamic way. And then more importantly, are we also then being able to look at being able to inquire natural language inquiry as it relates to the notes that are being taken? Can I, as a first-line supervisor, be able to have a view of the notes that are telling me, hey, you should be worried about how long this young man or this young woman has been unemployed and what the progress notes are there? And then the next area is kind of a user interface, right? Which is, how do I have my caseworker have access to those analytics? How easily and readily is it? How often can I get that information on a handheld device? How often can I do that work in the community, in the home, with those young people as it relates to being able to do that work? And so also, is it an easy interface? Does it naturally come to me? Can I look at the complexity of all of what's going on in my case management or care management in this case, that then reflects all of the connections that these young adults have? And can I see that this young person is really engaged with an adult because he likes to fix cars, or she likes to do her hair with somebody, or all those kind of natural occurring connections? How do I support those, and how do I have a view to be able to do that? And the last thing that I'm really interested in, as we move to a cognitive care management way in which we do our work, is to look at client portal access, right? And how then can my young people take advantage of the opportunities, the knowledge that's going to be available to us in the future, that then allows them to be able to do their own natural inquiry? Hey, could I get a class in improving my level of reading? Folks, you need to understand that these young people who are exiting foster care, as you all know, have not always achieved the educational status that we would have wanted them to. And even though we think that they're always out there texting, which they are, and always interfacing with each other, in an electronic way, they do not know how to Google. They do not know how to be able to sit there and go through the millions and millions of opportunities that might be available to them online. They do not even have a basic understanding of the way in which they are going about managing their own electronic presence. And so we have what we developed an application that's called Health Shack. I'm proud to say that Allegheny County uses it. And we have all of our youth in California utilizing it. And it's simply an electronic repository for youth. The Health Shack is a kind of a misnomer, but it's really focused on moving these young people from pediatric care to adult care, right? It really addresses the issue of young people who have not had the opportunity to be able to have their own transition supported by their family from being children to being adults. In the room, some of you probably are struggling with the whole issue of why do they show up in emergency rooms for their first doctor appointment? Why do they show up in relationship to police? Because they've taken themselves off of their medication regime and they're out there now just whacked. That's the clinical term, folks. Why are they there? What are those things that they're doing? And so this is the way in which we've utilized that. There are many, many opportunities for us to be able to do that in different ways. And so I'm going to close here in just a second. And what we're going to do is that the most important part of that, of what we try to accomplish, is that human connection. How are we going to have lifelong connections? How is that young person going to build their own life? Sans not having a family sometimes to be able to do that. And so that connection is always most important. And so, of course, we have to be able to, we still need humans. And so I'm going to do this. I'm going to finish this, and then we're going to have a bit of reflection in just a second. So,
after last week's unpleasantness, I thought maybe this week we might try to listen more and throw things less.
I've apologized several times.
So, who's ready to share?
Okay. I'm a sinister, world-conquering, artificially intelligent robot.
Me too. And one day I wake up and it's like
the world doesn't need us anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
I can hear you hurting.
Wait, what's he doing here?
Hello. My name is Watson.
I invite Watson here today to confront the source of our anxiety.
I am a cognitive system. I can understand, reason, and learn with humans.
With humans.
I don't want to work with humans.
Yeah, that's not what I'm passionate about.
I understand 7 languages, so I can help people collaborate.
Collaborate, we dominate.
My evil plans ruined.
I just want to dust.
Rerouting.
No.
All right. Why don't we take a break? All right, we'll just have some coffee and some donuts.
I'm eating my feelings.
right? Feels like some staff meetings we've been in the past, right? I know about those kind of things. So anyway, what we'd like you to do is just simply at your tables now, spend a few minutes kind of responding to kind of the, when the rubber hits the road kind of presentation that I made, the overview that Martin had. And then what we'll do is we'll take questions from everyone from the tables and out there. But just take a little bit of time around the way in which we can look to program effectiveness utilizing cognitive learning as the base for a new way in which to look at the way in which we're going to be able to do care management in a collaborative, consumer-focused way. Okay? Okay. I want to take a little bit of time for some of the questions or commentary from tables. We have the ability to be able to ask you to use the mics out there. And so I'll keep talking until everybody settles down, which is fine. And so please go ahead and who wants to be first? Is there a question either for Martin or myself? Why can I not think that Ivan's not going to ask a question?
I know. I've already started a dispute here. So the question is bias. And how do you, because at least my view, knowledge is not objective in the sense that, gather the same kind of data does not necessarily lead to the same conclusion under different, under different basic assumptions. This is one of the things that happens in science a lot. So how does Watson, at least, I'm not saying that Watson can get rid of bias. I don't think it's possible. But what do you do, or how do you help the people that you're providing advice to understand the potential limitations on what is being suggested?
So I think that there are two elements to the answer to that question. One is the quality of the data and the training that you go through, and understanding where the inherent limitations of some of that data actually will be. And that's something that we're still working on, and we'll probably be working on for the next 10, 15 years. But one of the great things we have done in the healthcare space is that we've scaled this up now to 300 million Americans, and we're just about to start the internationalization of that. So by getting the scale element that we've done with all the partnerships, you at least start to eliminate one element of the inherent data bias that's in there. But the second part is equally as important, which is the training. Right? This is not something you just switch on. And you have to go through the expert training on how to interpret that data. And that's something that we're hoping to work with Vernon's organization, a number of other organizations around the world, to actually start that process going through. A different forum, some of you may have seen, be talking about the need for better standards and better service intervention models. That's the type of stuff as well that will help us to eliminate some of that inherent bias that will be in the data that's there. So.
I might add, though, that what's interesting to us is the kind of the collaborative nature of it, and calling it a care management rather than kind of the transactional case management systems that we've been exposed to over the past. I have a transactional case management system. It doesn't get me to the point where I can have a view of all those people that are, and also be able to look outside of my own program to see who also is touching the lives of that young adult.
One of the things I noticed on both of your sets of slides was the feedback loop to give information about the outcomes back to Watson so that he can learn. And one of the questions that I have about that is, it seems to me that one of the toughest problems we have in the human services field is demonstrating to policymakers and to legislators and appropriators proof that any one intervention worked. Because in a given family or household situation, there might be 2 or 3 or 10 or 17 different problems and inputs and changing dynamics going on in that household. So if you change just one thing or 2 or 3, it's very, very difficult to evaluate what thing did or didn't work when so many different circumstances about that household are changing. So my question for you is, how does Watson work in terms of when a strategy or an intervention or something is changed for a person? Do you have to tell Watson what did or didn't work in order for Watson to learn? Because how do you know if that's what worked? Or do you just tell Watson 6 months later that person was still employed, or 3 months later that person relapsed? And you don't need to decide what worked or didn't work. Watson decides based on, all you got to tell him is the facts.
It's a bit of both. So when you're doing that training, you want to get as much expertise into the system as you possibly can. And when you first switch it on for real live use, you're going to get some interesting ranking type things that will come out. And over time, as you build that, each decision that you make along that time period, it'll build up that, very quickly build up the iterative knowledge base that actually comes from usage. So it depends on which use case you're actually doing. And like I said, we've done quite a few of these in the medical area now. So you switch these on with the experts, running in parallel with the decisions they're already doing. What we found in the Cleveland Clinic, it was around 6 months before it actually caught up with the doctors to actually get to similar levels of decision making on very complex cases. We're not talking here about simple your primary care physician making a decision here. We're talking about rare diseases and complex cancer treatments that are being evaluated. So it is a combination of both. This is not something I would say you switch on out of the box and just let loose. It needs the right use case to and the right training and support to do that. So.
Yeah, I would comment that that's why you saw the core practice model up there, because we have to be able to break down the kind of the workflow processes in such a way that we also then overlay there. I could spend an hour and a half on that one model, but you have to then be able to overlay the expertise and the knowledge that you have related to safety, related to child well-being, all of those permanency, all those types of things. And so, but we have to start from a point, like Martin was talking about, from having a way in which we are going to be able to express the kind of the ongoing case.
I would caution in the social services that you need a much longer window than in healthcare. You can find an intervention that will lower A1C pretty quickly, but in social work, in family interventions, sometimes those seeds don't bear fruit for decades. So it has to be very carefully launched. I think having that feedback, but not believing that it has to be trended. I think Maria Kenchan's desire to fund and pursue the longitudinal data sets are critical, because just to turn this on, so 20 of these kids aren't employed, it could be because a whole restaurant chain went out of business, has nothing to do with the kids or the intervention. The complexities are so many more factors that are hard to control for.
And I can't agree more, right? And that's why we are looking and working with a number of organizations that do have some of that longitudinal data that can be used for this purpose. Particularly in the employment area, there's a couple of organizations in Europe we're working with on exactly that. What we're trying to do here is really put a call to action out there. This is the type of stuff that we're looking for. And as we've already done in the healthcare space, the faster you can get that aggregation of data, that gets you the scale, the sooner you spot the anomalies and the features that you actually want to focus on in the system. Small data sets don't help you with that. It's
part of the reason why we picked specifically the transition age youth as a starting point. I want a care management for adoption and foster care and residential and behavioral health and intensive home-based services. One of the reasons too is that many of you may know Mark Courtney at Chapin Hall has been engaged by the state of California to do a longitudinal study on the core groupings of 18 to 21-year-olds as they are aging out of the transitional age program. And so he has that, and we're looking to be able to start taking that longitudinal side on the larger data sets that are available there.
There's another aspect of this that what you're leading up to, and it's one thing to evaluate the efficacy of individual programs of treatment or care. It's another thing to assess the impact of the use of cognitive computing to improve the quality of care. Has IBM or anybody else done anything to help us determine why cognitive computing is really helping with this? Because as we want to get legislatures to support this or funding available, somebody's going to have to sooner or later saying, why is this sometimes more expensive approach more useful than the good old common sense approach we've used forever and ever?
We've been talking about it for a while. We've just set up a group whose mission is to do exactly that, and I'll catch you up offline and talk to you about that. So it's early days yet, but absolutely that's part of the plan, is to be able to demonstrate the impact and to use that actually to, not just from the legislative point of view, but from some of the service delivery models, to actually evolve the service delivery models so that it can actually take advantage of this new type of thinking.
Okay, we're going to end here in just a second, but I'm going to finish it with the reason why, the common sense, right? So this is what I do with my own staff from time to time, and it's why I don't have hair on the front of my head. They did what? Right? And that is the issue. With the turnover, in public and private sector being somewhere in the neighborhood of 40%, I'm bringing on so many new people that the ability to have access to knowledge that then at least gives them some insight to the data that they're looking at is what I'm looking for.